So, welcome, viewers, listeners, to another edition of Globespan 24x7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh of Globespan and Travelspan. With us tonight is technical operator Mr. Devin Bissoon. Tonight, our topic is the struggle for free and fair elections in Guyana by the Guyanese diaspora. Joining us to discuss this topic tonight is four well-known gentlemen, Mr. Chuck Mohan, Charles Mohan, Mr. Mel Carpen, Mike Persaud, and Salim Nasruddin. Let me give a little more introduction of each one of them. Chuck is an adjunct lecture professor in New York. He teaches at several colleges in the past. I don't know how many he does today. Chuck and I know each other when he was a student at City College in the 70s. He would not remember, but I remember very well the first course I took in Black Studies. He graded my exam that was given by Professor Margarita Matthias. He made some errors. I don't know if he probably doesn't remember that, but I remember it very well. He made some errors in the geographic questions, and I had to go back and show him, look, you marked my paper incorrectly. And he gave me a couple more points that boosted me to an A grade. And then, I don't think he remembers all of those things, but Chuck was very, very well known in the Black Studies department by all the department. In fact, he was so well known that the chairman of the department chased him all around. I think, was it with a broom or a stick to beat him?
A knife.
A knife, there you go. I remember that very well. And the chairperson of the Department of Black Studies at that time was Leonard Jeffries, who is the uncle of Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Mike Persaud and I go back a very long time, late 80s, I believe, when we were involved in the struggle for the restoration of democracy. And we organized several protests regarding free and fair elections, as well as subsequently about matters pertaining to Richmond Hill, including getting adult-free education in one of the schools for community people. Salim Nasruddin and I, again, we go back a long time in the 80s when Salim used to do a lot of pro bono work for us in our campaign literature. In fact, he still does pro bono work for several people. Not for me anymore, though, but certainly helped me with news publications. And he also played a very vital role in the restoration of democracy in Guyana. Mel and I didn't have a very long relationship about the struggle for free and fair elections. I wasn't aware that he used to come to City College that often until subsequently. But at City College, there were several figures who would come. Janet Jagan, Chetty Jagan, practically all of the left-wing leaders of the Caribbean, including Raul Gonzalez, the late Maurice Bishop, Michael Manley, among others, who had come there to give talk. I was in student government, so I knew I allocated, well, I didn't allocate funds, but I was part of the government that voted for funds for these activities. And Mel played a very, very vital role in the restoration of democracy in Guyana. Here, and I'm sure in Guyana as well. Mel was one of the early people, but I believe the earliest, and I stand corrected, was Chuck Mohan. So I will ask Chuck if you could give us a little background about how this struggle began in the 70s. I believe you're one of the earliest persons who came here along with Mel. I'm not sure which one of you came first and started this movement. Over to you, Chuck.
Well, thanks for having me in the program, Vishnu. Yes, and we do go a long way, very long way. And despite over the years, we might have had some political ideological differences.
We did have ideological differences, yes?
We have always had respect for each other and always acted very civil and friendly anytime we meet, up until today. And I say that to people. But it began for me back in 1973. I went back home to Guyana after 3 years here. And I was introduced to Chetty one morning by a gentleman by the name of John Ramkumar, who would take fruits to Chetty and Janet. He lived at Unity. As a matter of fact, when President Jack Dio met me the first time, He asked me if I knew that person because that person was very, very friendly to our family. And he used to speak to President Jagbio's mother about us. And so he remembered that. When I was in Guyana, I think the elections had just finished, and Comrade Chetty asked me, when are you leaving? Can you take some things in your suitcase for me to New York? So I thought maybe some clothing or something. I got to Freedom House. Man, it was like I was a library that my suitcase was. Books, a mirror, all kinds of letters to different individuals in New York, and to some people who ran small newspapers. And many of them, he directed me to make sure you give this specifically to that person. And that's my beginning with the organization here. And then there was communication back and forth, back and forth. I might be making a trip here. I remember in 1976, he made a trip here to New York. I couldn't be there. I was in hospital. I had a surgery. But one of the big events, the earliest times that, well, let me go back a little. We would be meeting back in about 1975. One of our main comrades here was going on the different names for personal reasons. His name was John Brown one day. It was Mr. Cohen the next day, and meet him at the bookstore here, and et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know who this person was, but we were communicating in a different way. But one of the liaison between that person and myself was a dear friend who just passed away, Richard Hoyen, an active Jamaican. He knew that individual who turned out to be Karshan Arjun. And so our relationship began. We started to communicate. We started to do small little things on behalf of the party and so on and so forth. And then more people start to come in, Flatty, V, Seiji, many other people over the years. Some I can't remember their names, and I don't want to call everyone name because I forgot some of them. I don't want to leave people out. But many people were involved in those early days.
Mark Munsami.
Huh?
Mark Munsami.
Mark Munsami, who's now in Brazil. But sometimes we met in cars. Okay. We sometimes would go to different comrades' homes in the afternoon. They would cook and have dinner. Their families would cook and have dinner for us. We'd have a meeting, sometimes late. At that time, we didn't have cars. We were traveling by subway and bus. So, but we did it because people were dedicated, extremely dedicated. And that Comrade Chetty came here, I remember in 1977, and had an extensive tour all over the place. Colleges, Rutgers, universities in Connecticut, City College, all we had meetings, etc. A little before then, we formed what was the first group, the Committee for Democracy and Majority Rule in Guyana. And Comrade Chetty made it very, very clear to us. When we spoke of majority, it was not about Indian based on population or ethnicity. It was that most of the people at that time were against the dictatorship in Guyana. And so people sometimes might have misconstrued the name, but we had that obligation to correct it. During that time, Comrade Chetty, we had very, very close relationships with many, many groups here in New York. In terms of us, the Committee for Democracy and Majority Rule, we had connections with nearly every left-wing group you could think of in New York City, including the Communist Party USA. We held many of our meetings were at the CPUSA headquarters. We volunteered at different the Nicaraguan groups, the Salvadorian groups, you name it. We volunteered in their struggle also while they would volunteer. The Palestinians, the Iranians, and so on and so forth.
Don't forget the Grenadians.
The Grenadians, yeah, the Caribbean groups too. We had another Grenadian, I don't want, Jamaican, Winston Simmons. Very, very supportive comrade up until today. Pablo and some of those guys, Michael Wilshire, all of them Jamaicans. And we got this group together, and we started to do lots of work, all right? Not only doing political work over here, but we were sending material things back to the party, whatever they needed. We did lots of fundraisers in Brooklyn on Rogers Avenue, in the basement of one of the comrades at the time.
I remember that.
You remember that? All the time. We did fundraisers all over the place, and we had excellent attendance. Excellent attendance. And those people should be thanked for their early support when many people had given up. Many people didn't want to be bothered. Many people wouldn't give you $1 donation to the cause. But many of them stood up with us. And listen, did we all have the same ideas? No. Many times we worked together as a group because we had one goal in mind, and that was to get rid of the PNC government. All right. We encountered the PNC, the thuggery, at least for myself. I remember in 1 year, the Chronicle Symphony Orchestra was touring New York. Wesley Curtin was the guy in charge of that. And I went to Lincoln Center. They were playing outdoors, and I was taking pictures. They tried to attack me and told me, don't take pictures here. I said, this is public. That was in 1977. And the Young Workers' Liberation League, which was the youth arm of the Communist Party, we had our convention at Columbia University. And I was outside on the big grounds, and I was attacked by about 5 of them. Okay. And Winston Simmons and Richie came out the building at the same time. And when they saw them coming, they left. We know that, and I think Vishnu, you might have been here. Reed was speaking at LIU there on Flatbush Avenue.
That's right, yes.
When he claimed there was a bomb threat, he didn't want to answer questions. He claimed it was a bomb threat and broke up the meeting. And when we were outside, anti-PNC people was outside the gate, and the PNC supporters are in the gate. That's how they locked the gate. And one of them pulled a gun on us.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. When Carpen and I were given permission by the PPP to be observers of the election list at the consulate, which was at that time 3rd Avenue and 41st Street in the Blue Cross Blue Shield building.
That's right.
Carpen and I went up there. I think the woman's name was Ben at the time. Said that we are here. We showed them the letter, which was signed by the party's representative, Narbada Persaud, that we were officially from the PPP to look at the list, etc., etc. They told us, no, they know nothing about it. We can't go in there. And all of a sudden, someone appeared, a young man, from behind their counter, and he just kind of pulled aside his jacket to show that he had a gun. We were monitored at that same place. We had demonstrations there. We had a demonstration there one night when it was 6 inches of snow or more. Okay. A friend of mine that attended BMCC with me, he was a PNC supporter, but we were friends. We had a demonstration at the consulate there. And he came back to me, he said, you need to be careful. And I said, why? He said, well, at those demonstrations, they take pictures of all of you. He said, and I was up at the consulate in Hamilton. Green was there. He said, and while they were talking about other people, they were focusing on you. So as a friend, I'm telling you, be careful. You know, so I'm just giving you certain
Right.
little.
So let's hear from Mel, and then we can come to the others, and then we'll come back to you. But I do remember there were demonstrations that I went to in front of the consulate downstairs, the Blue Cross Blue Shield building, during the 1978 rigged referendum, the 1980 electoral fraud, the 1985 electoral fraud, and so on and so forth. Mel, tell us about your background in the struggle for free and fair elections.
Well, my background started in the sugar estates in Guyana. And from 1972, when I relocated to the United States, it continued here in Chicago. And because I was, my visa has said University of Chicago. So that's where I stayed for quite a while before relocating.
And you went to a top-notch university, man. We had to go to CUNY.
Well, it wasn't top-notch. At least it was better than university without walls.
Are you throwing parables at someone?
No, I'm not. I'm stating a fact. And I don't have graduate degrees like PhDs and everything, but in the classroom at University of Chicago, I encountered a lot of students from Roosevelt University. Roosevelt University, those of us who are acquainted with the history, used to be the YMCA college. And at that college at that time, Dr. Jagan had done an undergraduate degree in biology before he went on to Northwestern University to do his dentistry degree. So I was able in those days, in a non-political situation, to rub shoulders with people who have actually helped us in Guyana because of Chetty Jagan, because of his stand on, the Vietnam War, because the Midwest there it was a hotbed of struggle against the Vietnam War. And from time to time, I would encounter people who learned about our struggles in Guyana for free and fair elections, and they would send letters of support. They would send checks, and they would invite me to speak from time to time. But I had to be very careful because I didn't have a visa, so I could safely say it now. So. Anyhow, one of the things that we did was not only political, but we made a lot of friends for the party. Non-political friends in universities, at lectures, at trade union meetings. So the representation we give to the party were across the board in the industrial level, political level. And there were a few guys who were in seminary who were our members. So we had representation. Guyana had representation on many areas, in many areas. Our trump card in the Midwest was the man Chetty Jagan because he was well known. His wife Janet is from that area, or was from that area also. So when people heard that Chetty Jagan and Janet Jagan from Guyana was going to be passing through, there was a high degree of interest. They want to meet these people. Americans want to meet them. And we assisted in the footwork to help plan meetings, public meetings, lecture tours, and fundraising in order to buy books and school supplies for Guyana. More so, a lot of the people who went to school with Cherry Jagan at university level, you know, especially the dentists, were practicing in Chicago on the outskirts. A lot of them were given free dental work, dental services to Guyanese and others. I don't want to stray off from the subject too much, but we made a lot of friends for the party there. Trade union friends, political friends, and
so there was an active group there in Chicago.
There were two. The name is Mel. There were 2 or 3 of us who were operating in Chicago. One guy was from Port Morant. I'm not at liberty to call his name because he was very nervous about being in the public. But he was a boyhood friend of Comrade Cherry. He resided in Chicago, and in his living room, we had meetings and some good curry also. The cricket matches were something else that no one remembers. The Guyanese guys would what would I say here? The Guyanese guys would play others cricket tournaments, cricket matches. And cricket attracts a lot of attention. And when folks come to see the cricket, we used to hit them up for donations, and we used to hit them up to take the literature back to their places of employment and share with their co-workers and others who might be interested. So in as much as
this was in the late 70s?
This was between 1972 and 1981. Did I answer your question?
Mel, I had met some Trinidadians, and they had told me that when they were studying at the University of Chicago and other universities nearby, they had good camaraderie with Guyanese students. Were these Trinidadians also part of the group?
There were a few Trinidadians, yeah. I can't recall their names offhand, but they would come to our public meetings when Dr. Jagan came under the auspices of the U.S. Peace Council. Whenever, you know, the U.S. Peace Council would have Cherry on their platform. Not only the Trinidadians, but they were Jamaicans. And as I said earlier, he was our trump card. He drew a lot of people.
Okay.
He attracted a lot of people from the Jewish diaspora. There were a lot of Jewish people or Jewish nationals who were either Nazi prisoner of war, and of course they were free, you know, living in Chicago now. He attracted a lot of them, and they came to hear our struggle, hear about our struggle and our people.
All right, let's hear from Salim and then Mike, and then we'll come back around, and if you could talk about your New York experience when we return to you, Mel. Yeah, Nasruddin.
Yeah, well, thanks, Vishnu. Really appreciate you inviting me to this very esteemed panel. You know, around the group here is probably more than 150 years of activism, you know, in the diaspora, you know, and, you know, it goes without say, you know, before we start any discussion like this, we want to give a big thank you and appreciation to all the people who have struggled and many who have died for free and fair elections in Guyana and for
I
democracy
agree.
in Guyana. You know, many struggled in Guyana and for 28, 30 years until 1992. Many died during that time, and we want to, you know, take a time out to reflect on those who did their job and did it well. And many, of course, were in some state of you know, they were kind of thrown out of Guyana, and that in itself is a punishment, to be ostracized from the country that you love, that you fight for, you know. And there are many that I know that wanted to go to Guyana and be part of what's happening, but because of the construct and how it is, you know, it couldn't be. So I'm glad that today we are able to at least talk about how democracy was delivered in Guyana, as against, you know, still struggling for it. You know, I think that it goes without saying, and my personal participation in this came in the late 80s when I was still in high school, you know, and then I transitioned into college and I continued the activism. For me, when I was in high school, I was a very vibrant kind of, you know, interested in helping people, you know, socially, politically. And there was so much going on in the world. There was the Iran struggle, the Iranian revolution. There was South Africa, Mandela. There was the Afghanistan issue. There was the Palestinian issues. And I was part of all of that, you know, in high school. And I was like very excited. I remember even wearing Islamic clothes and going to school, you know, in solidarity with the Islamic revolution in Iran and all those kind of things. And after a while, I realized, you know what? I'm really from Guyana. I ain't from Palestine. I'm not from Afghanistan. I'm not from South Africa. And I could hail you know, Nelson Mandela and so on, but I mean, like, you know, it doesn't hit home, so to speak. And I felt the alienation when I went to other people's struggle, but then I realized that they would not come to a struggle that's a Guyanese struggle, you know, and that I had my struggle. That Guyana had a dictatorship. Guyana had a dictatorship, and it was a duty for every Guyanese to either expose it, do something about it, and so on. And I started my search from high school, like, you know, how can I be Guyanese? How can I express my energy and my enthusiasm for better governance and so on to my own people, my Guyanese people? And I searched around and I found some groups. There was a cultural group in at that time, Guyanese were not that much, and they were not that organized. But there was a group in Richmond Hill that with Prem Mazir and those guys, which I joined just to figure out who am I and what they're doing and how I can be part of it. Then and they asked me to do a whole lot of work for them. And that's where I connected with, you know, quite a few leaders like Ravi Dev, you know, who was very inspirational. You know, for me as a guy who grew up in the Malcolm X sort of mentality and psyche, Ravi Dev resonated, you know, as someone who can make things happen, you know. And then, you know, then I remember Betaram Ramracha writing a few things. I went to some of these protests that you guys are talking about, and I found guys like Betaram Ramracha and so on, and I started building relationship. Then after that, of course, you know, I went to Guyana, and I spent quite a few years there. You know, this is before 1992, when they had the free and fair election. I went there. I helped with the Jaguar Committee for Democracy. You know, they were very vibrant on the ground in Guyana, distributing the need for democracy in Guyana sort of language, and the free and fair election, you know, anti-PNC, anti-Hoyt, pro democracy sort of language. And quite a few times we were pulled in and locked up in you know, jails overnight. You know, I remember it happened in Charity, it happened in Georgetown, it happened in Berbice, and that's a regular thing, you know. But that was part of the terrain at that time. In the U.S. here specifically, my participation, of course, just like Chuck Mohan mentioned, Darshan, he was critical in giving me some articulation and some background knowledge of Guyana and the struggle and so on. You know, so I think that was the ACG, Association of Concerned Guyanese. They were very bright, vibrant. It was a PPP group here in New York, and I joined the guys. I know they're still around, but they did some great job in exposing and bringing some momentum to the struggle for free and fair election. And then they were you know, I remember Ramracha, even yourself, Vishnu, and others organized protests even at Mandirs. I remember when I think it was Gaukaran Sharma came to New York, you know, we picketed him. And there were others, you know, and we came up with all these nice banners and so on. So I mean, my role was really to facilitate, you know, great guys like yourself and Beturam and Ramracha and Ravi Dev and so on. There was a World Union of Guyanese for Democracy. I don't know if anybody remember that. That was a big happening when Cherry Jagan came, and he inaugurated that organization. And again, that organization main role was to lobby the leadership in America to get something happening in Guyana. And throughout the years of that struggle in the free and fair election of 1992, it was a lot of letter writing, a lot of protesting. You know, now you have social media to do all that stuff, but you had to use your legs in those days to get things done. And I remember we were able to get attention of few senators. We were able to get the attention of Jimmy Carter. You know, so in as much as Guyanese have been supporting their family and friends with money and barrel and all that kind of stuff for many years, I think the natural step to delivering a better governance for Guyana, you know, the diaspora also stepped up. We stepped up when there was need for food stuff, you know, simple things like, you know, aloo and flour and so on. Guyanese sent it with barrel. You know, when there was need for money and it was tough time for money transfer service at that time, Guyanese sent money. They found, you know, creative ways of getting money to their family. And then when Guyanese needed their help to deliver a better system, you know, we did it. You know, the diaspora did not come to America and sit and comment and dictate what Guyana wanted. We helped, we pushed, we did what any responsible diaspora population would do. We responded to the need of Guyana at that time. You know, and at that time the most important issues were survival, which was food and money, and democracy. You know, and free and fair election. I think to a large extent, you know, the diaspora did not let down Guyana. Cherry Jagan himself came to the diaspora umpteen times for fundraising. You know, he knew that the diaspora could play an important role, and with the money came the voice and the support and the lobbying that we did here in the diaspora. So, you know, I think there was a lot of interest by the diaspora, and I think there's a lot of Guyana. I remember when I went back to Guyana, just to figure out how do I play a role in any little way towards democracy. And I'm not claiming here that I delivered free fair election. What I'm claiming, you know, is that I played a role like everyone else should, and every Guyanese should. And you should be proud of it, whether you distributed one flyer or you were there, you know, chanting or whatever you were doing. So I remember that there were a lot of other Guyanese who were in Guyana helping to spread the word and push democracy and so on. And quite a lot of them, I know Vishnu, you know them, Chuck, Mohan, you guys know these guys. A lot of them are letter writers today. A lot of them are just, you know, sitting back and analyzing the situation and see, you know, after these many years, has democracy really been working for Guyana that we've worked so hard for? So the struggle for free and fair election and the delivery of democracy has been somewhat completed from my perspective, but I think the delivery of a more democratic governance in Guyana is still a work in progress. And I think a lot of Guyanese in the diaspora are at that stage playing that role to ensure that Guyana is being steered in the right direction.
But thanks. Before I get to Mike, I just want to issue some anecdotes and not clarification, but recollections. I do remember you at several CUNY campuses organizing and demonstrating and leafleting and so forth. I think Rehman Ali, Chetty Jagan's son, was part of the group as well. I believe Taran came much later, if I remember right.
Well, Taran came from the Guyana when we went to Guyana.
That's right.
And we developed a group in Guyana.
And you mentioned Arjun Karshan, and he went by several nom de plume, nom de guerre that Chuck mentioned. And Chuck also, as well as Mel, pointed out that raising money was almost impossible. If somebody gave you $1 in those days, that was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And correct me, Chuck, when you come back, I think most non-Guyanese probably gave more money than Guyanese. The Caribbean people, Afro-Caribbean people, gave probably more money than Guyanese at that particular time. You couldn't get Guyanese to give money. In fact, they wanted nothing to do with Guyana. Understandably so, because they were persecuted. The left, look, we're done with Guyana. We're not going back. We want nothing to do with that place. Mike Persaud.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm pleased to be on this panel today. All the persons on the panel, I got to know all of you through political activism. I came to New York in 1972. The following year, there was another massively rigged election. And after that, I used to be a student here, but I used to call Time and Newsweek and ask them why they were not covering that 1973 election. And a person in the office used to be on 6th Avenue, said, okay, no, we got a report from our stringer in George Strong, but it wasn't important enough, so we didn't publish anything. Or one of the magazines did publish a 1-paragraph story, but that was all. The world at large was not exposed or didn't care about what was going on there. I think I vaguely recall that around 1970, mid-70s, around 1976, maybe 77, I got to know Karshan. I don't remember. I might have met him in the summer at a cricket field. He used to have a cricket team. I used to have my own cricket team. And so Karshan we started talking about what was happening in Guyana. And he invited me to his project. He always used to have like 12, 25, sometimes up to 30 people outside the Guyana consulate, 622 3rd Avenue, around 33rd, 9th Street and 3rd Avenue. In the evenings, like after work, 4:30, 5 or 6 o'clock. And that was where I met Chuck Mohan and Mel Carpen, and quite a few other people. Narayan was one name, a guy named Van Slightman. They were from the WPA. Yeah. But I was there several times in the late 70s. Father Dark was killed in 1979. And in 1979, a guy named Jagdeshwar Lal, we call him Jago, who lived near to Fordham University campus, called me and said Kit Nascimento was coming to speak at Fordham University on the new World Information Order. So I called Karshan, and Karshan said, let's go, we are going to protest. Karshan brought down about maybe 15 people. I got together another 6. And we made placards and so on the night before. And the following morning, I don't remember how I got into the head of the communication department. The professor who was head of the communication department, somebody must have taken us into his office. I don't recall now. But we told him what was happening. I said, look, they just killed a Catholic priest. This is a Catholic university. And then he called in another father. This is a Jesuit-run university. And the guy said, wait a minute, I got all the files here. They sent all these reports from Georgetown. And he pulled it out and read it in front of us. And the communications professor, I don't know if he had made a decision. He called the guy in the consulate. Guess who answered the phone there? Kit Nascimento was on the phone. And so the communications officer said, we don't know nothing about Guyana and who are you, what government do you represent? The only thing we know is that Galina's Associates, a PR firm, paid $250,000 a year, US dollars, worked for the Burnham government, and the PR firm called and set up this lecture. And so the professor gave me the phone to talk to Kit. and I said, I said, this is crazy, Mr. Nascimento. You coming here to speak on a free press issue, but you don't have free press in Guyana. And Kit said, he is a very calm, level-headed guy, even voice, very powerful guy. I don't think that guy could have matched any communications person, journalist in the United States. And he said to me, he said, "Comrade, how can you say that? Look, I have the Day Clean in my hand here, reading it right now." And I said, "Is that a newspaper or is that a stenciled news sheet? Haven't your police raided the office and took away the machines regularly and don't give them newsprint?" I said, "Come on, you're disingenuous. You're lying here." And the communication professor is sitting there listening to the whole conversation. I passed back the phone after a minute or two to the professor, and the professor canceled the meeting. He said, we can't allow this meeting to go on. And so that was a great success to block him. He was representing a government that was taking away all the rights of the people and had rigged 2 or 3 elections by that time. So that was the first thing. But anyway, let me fast forward quickly. In 1980, Carpen had ramped up his activity. He was going more frequently outside the Guyana consulate, and he was also going at lunchtime in 1980, 81, 82. He was going in the spring and summer at lunchtime outside the United Nations with placards and literature to hand out. And I used to drive my car from the Bronx, and as I recall, I used to get free parking on the street there. And I would pick it outside the United Nations with him. Again, there we would always get like 15 to 20 to 25 persons. And then we moved on to, by the way, one day outside the United Nations, that might have been 1980, a guy walked out from the UN building. I saw, but he was a Guyanese, I think his name is Sanders. He walked across and said, "What are you guys up to?" He saw we were Guyana and said, "Well, we are protesting and calling for free and fair elections." And he said to us, he said, "Did you hear what happened last night?" And I said, "No, what happened?" And then he said, "Vincent Tika was shot and killed last night in Georgetown." And it was a shock because we didn't listen to BBC and we don't get that news on American TV and so forth. And so that might have been 1980. I think, if anybody remembers, was Vincent Tika killed in 79 or 1980?
I don't remember. Might have been 79.
Okay, well, so that would be 1979. We were there. But we had, in 79, the Iranian Revolution took place. Carpen used, some other people from Brooklyn, some Black Muslims used to join us, and we used to be side by side with them outside the UN. Huge demonstration outside the UN in those days. And so we rode through the whole of the 1980s. I had never heard about Ravi Dev and Jaguar Committee. But I recall this, in 1990, February 10th, I will always remember that date, I got a call about a meeting taking place on Liberty Avenue. And I came there at that meeting. It was the packed meeting on the storefront area. It was a whole ground floor. It used to be an office belonging to a travel agent named, I forgot his name now.
Reggie Romano?
No, he died. The guy, he used to operate in London before he moved to New York. Anyway.
Bacchus?
Jim Bacchus, that's his name. And we that meeting had over 100 people all around, packed.
It was packed. I think Chuck was there. I think Chuck was there. Joey was there. Yeah.
That was the first the Guyanese diaspora was coming of age with that meeting. That was a signaling meeting. Never before was there a meeting like that. You had to be there to feel the energy and the enthusiasm to be in that meeting. And I don't even know if I had heard the name Ravi Dev before. But Ravi Dev, I have a little thing here, I read it out. On February 10th, 1990, there was a huge meeting on Liberty Avenue. Guyanese activists had traveled from Chicago, Florida, and elsewhere. Dr. Fenton Ramsahoy flew in from Barbados to attend. The agenda to discuss what to do about free and fair elections. I did not know most of the people there. Arjun Karshan's ACG, I had not known him before, and Ravi Dev's Jaguar committee were well represented, and Dev seemed to be in charge, chairing the meeting. Lots of folks were given 2 minutes to speak. When my time came, I outlined a program of activities which included lobbying the White House, U.S. congressmen to support the call for free and fair elections in Guyana. The following day, from among the attendees, the World Union of Guyanese for Democracy was formed and given a mandate to pursue a program of activities calling for free and fair elections. Rupnarine Persaud was the elected chairman of the organization. So that was where all the big names, I'm calling them the class of 1990, because those people that were there, they were almost unknown at that time, but today, now, 32 years later on, all of these people are very active as political activists. Some have gone on to do great things. Dev has gone on to great things. Bisram is almost a columnist. I think at that same meeting, Nasruddin was there. First time I had known Chuck Mohan years before from protests in the 78, 77 time. Mel Carpen the same time. Chuck Mohan, I would recall, one time we were going around in circles, somebody with a bullhorn, what do we want? Free and fair elections. Who killed Father Dark? And Chuck Mohan was doing the loudspeaker, the megaphone, what do you call it? And he said, who killed Father Bark? And I ran up to him and said, no, Father Dark. I had to correct him. So I remember that very, and I remember Chuck Mohan had a girlfriend there who was very attractive. She was Puerto Rican or something. Years later, when I saw Chuck Mohan, I wanted to ask him what happened to that girl. Anyway, it was a great fun being there, but I have 7 slides when you're ready, Mr. Bisram, if you want me to go into that.
I don't know if,
but I'll end my intro there.
Devin has to be the one for that. I don't know much about slides. Devin?
And if I can add a little story on the World Union of Guyanese for Democracy, Mike Persaud, you would have
after
known.
You we'll go to Chuck and then Mel. Go ahead.
Me,
yeah,
Chuck?
I was just going to throw a little story out there. World Union of Democracy elected Rupnarine Persaud, I believe, right, as the secretary. Yes. And he had that guru religious kind of look, And I remember a big event that we did was a fast for democracy, when he led fasting and many other fasted, but he led it every day.
Bechu led it every day.
Yeah, and First Avenue in Manhattan, where we had like a vigil and all that kind of stuff. So those were exciting times. Those are like Mike said, it was a coming to maturity of the Guyanese who were looking. They were doing it in pieces, but the World Union of Guyanese for Democracy were able to kind of put some energy in the room. And Cherry Jagan was at that meeting.
No, Cherry Jagan was not here.
No, Cherry was Fenton Ramsahoy.
Ramsay was on the first day, and the second day, somebody, a guy who was teaching at the University upstate from WP, he brought in brother UC Kuya.
Yeah, was here, yeah.
Let me just add a quick note here. While when I finished speaking, outlining what I would like to do to lobby U.S. government officials, a PPP guy kind of heckled me. He said, "Who the hell needs U.S. congressmen? We don't need those people." And I never responded to him. I didn't have time to respond. But I thought these people, those people, folks were very miseducated about the politics at that time. They were they had to be disabused of the past politics and get on with the forward-looking views.
Yeah.
I remember a guy sidling up through that crowded room next to me when I finished, and he was asking me, well, introduce himself, and then he was asking me who I was, what I did before, and so forth. The guy who came up next to me to ask me all these things, I still remember it vividly. And that was the first time I was going to meet Vishnu Bisram. And when he called his name, I said, "Oh, I know the name." Vishnu Bisram and some other guy was publishing a newspaper. He did a monthly or weekly newspaper, which I used to pick up at a grocery store. And they had very good stories about how the economy in Guyana had totally collapsed. They used to, I remember one picture of a bicycle. They didn't have foreign exchange to import tubes and tires. And they were very good folks who could improvise. They used to cut tires and patch the tire to make it work. And that was a symbol of how badly the economy had collapsed in that country. There were other stories, but this is not a time to go into that. Okay.
So let's hear, Chuck.
Yes, Mike, that young lady is my wife for 40 years now.
Okay.
And she's not Puerto Rican, African American.
I remember Chuck. I remember Chuck also bringing his kids to meetings.
Yeah, my daughter used to come a lot.
Yeah.
You know, Vishnu, I must say that an hour and a half is not a lot of time to discuss what we are discussing, because you know, it wasn't smooth running. And like every organization, we had problems. And the Committee for Democracy and Majority Rule had its problems too. And that's why there was a split in 1981-82. And it was a split when we started the Committee for Democracy and Majority Rule. We said we're going to have a rotating chairmanship. Carpen was first, I would have been the second, and so on and so forth. And when it became my time, I said, listen, I don't need no chairmanship. Let's just do the work. I think it was a mistake on my part, because then we kind of I made that error and developed kind of a personality where I would say a mini dictatorship. I want to say, because I think we need to speak the truth about these things. Carpen was the one who really split the group, and it caused a lot of problems, and Sash was involved, because we met, Joey came into the group, he moved here, opened his office, and what Joey was saying, let us expand the committee to include all Guyanese who oppose the regime, because we were kind of closed in a way where we were only having people who believed in Marxism, Leninism in the group. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, let's expand it. Joey never had interest in being a leader or anything in the group. He had his dentistry to take care of. But we had a meeting where we discussed James Morgan, Mark Munsami, Mel was there, that we need to take a different direction. All right? Carson was there, and I think Carson was intimidated with the presence of Joey. He thought that Joey wanted to take over, but that was not the truth. He just needed to take a new direction. So he said he's going to go back to and discuss it because he was going to Canada. And when he come back, we will meet and we will discuss it. When he went to Canada, Sash encouraged him to break away. And when he came back to New York, never reported back to us, but all of a sudden we heard this thing called ACG USA. What the problem was there was that all the documents that we had as a group, Carson had it. Everything Carson had. And what happened after that was some of the people based on village relationships stayed with Carson, and then he started to include a lot of his family within the group. We said to the party quite clearly, this does not look good for the international relationship we have with many organizations. We formed the Committee for a Free Guyana, and we told them we will continue to function not as openly as the ACG, but we started to send home material things and so on and so forth. We still did political work, but we did not want to embarrass the party with two groups fighting each other. It wasn't necessary, not at that point in time when the party had more important things to do. However, yes.
Chuck, hold one second. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
You can see my screen?
Yes.
Class of
1990? No, clarification. We are seeing you, not his sharing screen.
You're not seeing my screen.
I think that's what Chuck meant. We're seeing you. Chuck,
am I right? You, yeah.
Can Devin share my screen with you guys?
Yeah. I think now he's sharing it. Yeah, now he's sharing it. Yeah.
And see it? Can all of you see it?
Yeah, but Mike, it's very, very small. We can't read that from afar.
Let me see if I can make it bigger then.
All right. Let's continue because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time. Let Chuck finish.
Yeah,
we can do that.
And so what happened was, we started to function separately. However, when we found out that Carson was having problems with the ACG, people started to rebel for some reason against him. And myself, Mark Moonsami, James Morgan, and Mel Carpen, we said, wait a second. You know, we may have differences with Carson, but he's a genuine guy.
He is a genuine guy.
And we cannot see other people started to come in and try to break this up. So we started to support him on different levels. And that is when they had a coup d'etat against Carson in the name of Rat Singh. He came in and took over the ACG for life. Okay? And that is when the ACG became this group with no contacts, no international contacts, never used to attend any kind of functions. They could hardly have a proper fundraiser. And they started to lose popularity amongst a broader section of the people, even though they had some support from diehard PPP supporters within the Richmond Hill community. Okay? Now, they didn't know how to organize like we knew how to organize Vishnu and Samaluddin. We knew how to organize, get people together. Okay? Again, like I say, we may have differences, but we work together. There was no working together with Rat Singh. And I think that that was a failure of the PPP not to pull him back and rein him in. However, I was at a function at the French consulate one time. There was a member of the French Communist Party. They had a function for him. And a woman met me there when she heard I was from Guyana. She said to me, do you know Rajendra Singh from Patterson College in New Jersey? I said, ma'am, let me make it very clear. I'm no friend of his, and I know him. And the woman went along and said to me, he's very anti-union, and he snitches on the staff of the college to the administration. Very bad. And I came back and I spoke to a few people. And I said to myself, the PPP is pro-union. How can you have somebody, and I even raised this question at the Holiday Inn Hotel in a meeting we had where Comrade Rohi was present. And I asked Comrade Cherry, how can we tolerate a guy who is anti-union to be leading a PPP support group? But I must say this, in 1996, Comrade Cherry called us, I think Mel and I, we had a discussion. He had visited New York and he was arranging to come back in 1997. Unfortunately, we know what happened. But he said to us, I will take care once and for all that problem we're having. And I wish it had happened, and maybe we would have had a stronger group today. And I want to leave you all with this. What is very hurtful to all of us who played a very important role in the diaspora for free and fair elections in Guyana, we're the forgotten people. When government people come here now, they don't want to say, hey, and they pass you and they're gone. Some of them don't even want to talk to you. And the people now who are supposedly supporting the PPP government are all a bunch of right-wing Trump supporters. This is very, very sad.
Yeah.
They are supporting, these are Trump, as a matter of fact, one of them unfortunately passed away, Rishi Persaud. A big Trump supporter, was supporting the PPP. Now they're jumping on the bandwagon because they see oil money in their vision.
Yeah.
When the days when we were struggling, they didn't want to know part of it. All of them coming out the woodwork now. And let me tell you, some of them are claiming they've been around for 30 years. But you and I, who have been around for that time, I mean, I've been around over 40 years. You and I can recognize these people when they're lying. All right.
Fish.
So yeah,
why don't I can finish the slides in about 6 or 7 minutes.
All right.
It's a lot of events that we went through in the struggle 1990 to 92.
Okay, if they're big in screen so we could see them.
Can you see the screen now?
Still small.
Can Evan share it?
I gotta go up close to see it, but go ahead.
Why do I call this meeting in 1990? Why do I call this the class of 1990? Because many of the persons gathered there have since gone on to become well-known political activists in the Guyanese community. They have stayed in the struggle for a better Guyana. Some of those persons are in the panel. A few got jobs with the new government, Carpen, that's the Ramsamy, Rajendra Singh, and so on. I have another, my next slide here gave some names. Arjun Karshan became ambassador to Suriname, 1990 to 2008. He's now deceased. Rajendra Singh, who later became Gaisuko's CEO and now ambassador to the Court of St. James. He has really moved up big time. That maybe is the kind of connections he has that Chuck was just talking about. Ravi Dev, he returned to Guyana around 1990, formed a party and won a seat in the parliament. He's today connected to Guyana Times newspaper. He's deeply respected for his writings on national issues and much, much more. Vishnu Besram, a frequent letter writer. He's a sort of columnist and activist. I think the folks who write regularly in the letters column, these folks should become recognized columnists, and the paper should be reorganized to define them as column writers. Beturam Ramracha, still an activist today. He became a distinguished author and commentator on national issues since that time. Rupnarayan Persaud was an indefatigable activist who did a lot of good work in the 1990 to 92 period. He was a main inspirer and driver behind the program of activities to the WUG, World Union of Guyanese. I used to write handwritten letters to the congressman and give it to him, and he would type it up and mail it out. Joe Ragnath was very active in WUG, still an activist today. Balram Rambrich, active in WUG, gone on to organize and establish an Arya Samaj temple. He's a main leader there, still an activist for political and social causes. Dr. Leslie Ramsamy was involved in WUG, returned to Guyana to become a minister in the new Chadijagan government in 1992. Rajendra Singh went on to become Gaisuko CEO and today ambassador to the Court of St. James. My next slide, well, Rup Persaud, we already talked about him. There are several other names. I must apologize to all those whose names I have forgotten and didn't mention here. I have actually forgotten Salahuddin, but anyway, I'll make for that. Jagdeshwar,
Chuck,
Jagdesh,
who's a lecturer, you know, lecturer and trade unionist.
well,
one of the longest serving trade unionists in America.
Yeah.
Actually, the longest serving Guyanese and Caribbean trade unionists in the United States, if I'm not mistaken.
I have mentioned Chuck Mohan, Mohan and Mel Carpen in some of my letters in the newspapers. There are several other names: Jagdesh, Mohanlal, Samad, Ramesh Kalisharan, Pandit Ramlal. These are all deceased, but these gentlemen did a lot of work to support the activities of World Union. In one of our visits to Washington, D.C. to visit the U.S. State Department, Kalisharan not only gave us his car, he gave us a driver also to do it. Pandit Ramlal did a lot of work. I don't have time to detail it. Samad was there. We used to have meetings in his machine sewing office, I think. Mohanlal used to go with me to all the Hindu temples to collect signatures for a petition which we gave to Congressman Elliot Engel, who forwarded to the U.S. State Department. I will go to my next slide quickly. Some highlights from 1990 to 92.
You forgot Joe Kanhai and Vassan Ramracha.
A lot of names were forgotten. I must apologize to all of them. I could not, it would take me time to sit down to remember them, but a lot of people were involved. Some highlights from 1990 to 92. We met several congressmen who received us warmly. Elliot Engel was one from the Bronx. Ted Weiss on the west side of Manhattan. Stephen Solars, he was from Queens and Brooklyn. We met with representatives in Senator Ted Kennedy's office in Washington, D.C. Senator Kennedy had set up a desk for the Guyana situation. Imagine that, what the senator did. He set up a desk with a lady named Trina Vargo to run the desk and monitor the Guyana situation daily. I want to tell the anecdote of meeting Senator Kennedy. I worked as a teacher in New York, and the teachers union, whenever they have presidential elections, would ask teachers to volunteer to go to do canvassing in Jersey, Pennsylvania, Florida, and so on. And I went out to, I think either New Jersey or Pennsylvania, and there Senator Kennedy had gone to root for the Democratic candidate running in Pennsylvania. And there were lots of people, and I went to him. People were lining up to speak to him. You only have 2 or 3 minutes. And then when I met Kennedy, I said, Senator, I'm from Guyana, and I remember you did a lot for our struggle, free and fair elections in 1991, 92. And he remembered. He said, well, thank you. I feel so good about this. I did a lot of work for Guyana, and I'm glad somebody remembered what I did. And that was the substance of the conversation. There was another guy named Randy Persaud, Professor Randy Persaud, who talked about meeting Kennedy. And I always remember this, and I want to say to him, well, look, I met Senator Kennedy also. Tell the story of how hard it was to get a meeting with Congressman Solars. I used to write letters. By the way, after the first day of the meeting in February 10th, 1990, when I went home that night, I drafted letters to several congressmen. And when I came back late the second day, I didn't know they had an election to elect, and they formed a group called World Union and so on. But I gave Roop the letter, and Roop loved what I wrote, and he typed it up. When Roop typed up a sort of a business card, chairman of WUG, secretary treasurer, he put my name on the card, and the PPP boys got so mad with him. And then Roop said, well, he's the only guy, Mike is doing all the work here. No, you guys came to a meeting, but nobody's doing anything. Mike is taking up the thing, the work. The program of activities was, what do you say, my brain product or something like that. Everything that I said was not what we carried out. Tell the story of Engel attending a WG meeting in Queens and said we don't have to be living in a district. Normally, to get to see a congressman, you have to live in his district. But when we met Engel, Engel had come to Queens for some kind of meeting, and we were there. Vassan wrote a story about it in his Guyana newspaper.
It was Jamaica Avenue and 240-something Street, yes.
And he said, look, you guys, you don't have to be living in my district. You have something, I'll support it. By the way, we had a meeting in Engel's office in the Bronx, New York, and he gave us very good support, almost as good support as Stephen Solars. Unfortunately, both of those two men have moved on. Solars have passed away since then, and Engel had lost his seat about a year or two ago. When we met Solar, one of the things about doing this kind of politics, you have to go to your congressman's fundraiser. They have to know you. I have a big note in my last slide, which I would talk about later. But the chief of staff in Engel's office came to my house in the Bronx. I lived. I had a house on a lot 70 by 100 foot. And he was running for re-election every 2 years, and he said, Mike, you got to do a fundraiser for me. How could I say no? Once a congressman did something for you, and I said, you know, I don't think I can. I don't have enough friends. And I called Carpen. Carpen would not support it. He wouldn't do anything. And that guy begged me. He said, Mike, I went to your house. I saw your backyard. You can do a tea party there. Bring 10 people. Bring 20 people. Collect $20 each. You can raise $500. But I had to turn it down flat. Carpen wouldn't support it. Let me move on. The next slide. Okay. We visited the U.S. State Department on 2 occasions. We were well received, and we presented a petition asking for free and fair elections. We had substantive discussions about what was happening in Guyana and how specifically they can support free and fair election. At that time, the elections had not been announced. The whole thing was in a rigmarole with the voters list and burning the voters, and all kinds of crazy things was going on. But we met Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Sally Kowal. She worked, her boss, the Secretary of State at that time was a man named, if I recall, Bernard Aronson. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State the following year, in 1991, we went back there. We met with the Assistant Secretary was Donna Reinach. And when we were in Washington, we visited several congressmen's office in the Capitol building. That was the same building that was attacked on January 6th. And we visited with Guyana desk officer Trina Vargo in Senator Kennedy's office, chair of the Western Hemispheric Committee. I forgot. I think he was a California Democrat, Demily. All of these folks gave us great support for free and fair elections. Many of them issued statements that were published in the press for free and fair elections. Lessons learned. I think I'm coming up to my last slide. I'm just trying to summarize lessons learned. You must cultivate relationships with congressmen, attend their fundraisers, always be prepared, present facts, make good arguments. What Congressman Stephen Solarz advised the Indian lobby group, form an Indian PAC, Political Action Committee, raise funds, go to their congressmen. When you do that and you cement relationships and you have any kind of thing where you need the support of the US government, you can rely on these congressmen to raise an eyebrow, do something for you. Let me reflect on something very quick. Okay, I have this another point here. Reflections on Mr. Jagdeo hiring a Washington-based pro-Republican lobbying firm costing $500,000. Well, that was a brilliant move. I will tell you right now, and all the people listening, that had Jagdeo not done that, he would not have been in power today. You see, Guyana is a PNC deep state control country. They have deep state control over the state, the GCOM, the civil service, police. And so if you didn't get, the PNC could have sworn in, passed a BS results and say, the PNC guy won, what is his name, Granger, and the deep state would have protected him. Nobody else would have been able to move him out. But quick moves, I can't go into detail with this now, quick moves by Nandlal and other people to tie it up and appeal quickly and tie it up in a court, it opened space for that lobbying firm to get all the ducks lined up, to get, there was another man whose name I don't remember, who was speaking out every 2 weeks with a big statement. You better shape up, have free and fair elections, announce the results, until Pompeo came into that, and that closed the issue, and that's how the PP was able to get back in power. The lesson from that is that Mr. Jagdeo, President Ali now, well, actually, Mr. Jagdeo is the de facto president. They must form a Guyana PAC, Political Action Committee. You will need help again. And many times you may not be able to hire a lobbying firm to get a job. You need, whatever you would need, you would have to initiate it at the congressional level, and which means you would always get half a dozen or a dozen congressmen to raise the issue in the Congress on behalf of Guyana. Guyana is an oil country. It is definitely going to need help in a lot of stuff. I'm going to give you a quick example here. Solarz was an important congressman who supported Indian causes.
May I interject here? Mike, could you give Mel another chance to and Sahaluddin, because we only have 10 minutes.
Let it 10 minutes?
Okay, let me finish up. PNC's deep state hold on the state. Had Mr. Jagdeo not hired that DC firm and got the backing of the US government, but is that the end of the problem? The last slide here, my personal reflections. What I learned from my political work, 1990, I met a Washington reporter who came to cover our event outside the United Nations. And when I told him what we were doing, he said he just came back from Guyana. He had gone to Suriname to cover some story, and he said, you can't have free and democracy in Guyana. And I said, why not? And that he was the guy who gave me that phrase that I always quoted and written in my letters. He said, that is a country where every last man, quote unquote, every last man votes race, and that has to change if you want real democracy. Guyana is a very racially divided country, and Indo-Guyanese man told me this. I said, I don't care how much money we lose on the oil contract. For the 2 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion, I don't care. All I care about is that you don't play politics with the Jagdeo government and cause him to lose power. In other words, he's telling me, forget this thing that you're fighting for, renegotiation of the contract to get a fair deal. Guyana has huge problems with ethnic politics. With that meeting in 1990, the Guyanese diaspora has sort of established itself. It learned about fundraising for political candidates. That's how politics is done. The basement issue saw the Guyanese community here in New York maturing and successfully stopped new laws aimed at suppressing the Guyanese people, thanks to chairman of a council committee led by Archie Spigner. Real estate operator Ahmad, attorney Trevor Rupnarine, Dr. Dan Paul Narine, and many more worked on those issues. So those two examples, the 1990 event and the one in 1997, 98, 99, the basement issue in Queens, were two important events that the diaspora, it showed them coming out, they were organizing, consciousness had developed. But we need a lot of work more to be done in the diaspora. I'm going to end there.
All right, Mel, and then Salim.
Yes, I'd like to make a suggestion. The presentation I would have would be very, we don't have enough time for whatever I have to present.
Yeah, I agree. We'll have a follow-up in October, I hope.
Yeah, could we
and
give me a chance?
Of the 1992 democratic elections, yes.
Yeah, could you give me a chance then to speak?
Please, no problem. But give your final thoughts, especially your reflections about New York.
Yes, and New Jersey, because we had an ACG group in New Jersey also.
Okay.
Of which I was the head. Underfoot.
Okay, so you could take a few minutes and talk, and then Mel, and then finally Chuck will summarize.
No. What I'm suggesting is I speak at the next meeting.
All right, no problem. We don't have a problem with that. Salim?
Yeah, well, again, I think this is definitely a discussion that needs to be told and recorded. I saw one of the comments on Facebook where someone mentioned kind of the same thing, that this is a very important discussion in Guyana's history and should be documented either in a documentary or book or something. So I think this is something that is useful and it's part of Guyana. Today the Guyana diaspora is almost 1 million outside of Guyana. We outnumber Guyana's population. We are wealthier than the Guyana population. We are much more educated than the Guyana population, not in a bad way. Just like we had it, just like in 1992 or 1991, 1990, we had more access to the powers that be that could have allowed and who intervened to ensure that Guyana does have a free and fair election. I think there's tremendous amount of value today for the diaspora to play a more meaningful role, both politically and from a governance perspective, as well as their intervention in the growing economy of Guyana. I would love to see a deeper acknowledgement of the diaspora participation in delivering democracy to Guyana, and more importantly, a deeper and more meaningful engagement by the administrators in Guyana and the diaspora. But I must say, the caveat to that is I think the diaspora itself needs a little more organization, a quote unquote, a more its own body, its own tangible group of people that can take leadership of the diaspora. We're 1 million. We're not 800,000. We are 1 million. So we need better organization in the diaspora to deliver a much higher integration into what Guyana is doing. I think there is definitely need for more younger Guyanese to be interested in what's happening in Guyana. at all levels, especially when it comes to and I gotta say this. I always tell people, you know, democracy is not an election. Election is a part of democracy. In fact, it's probably the smallest part of democracy. Democracy resides in institutions, systems, processes, and the Constitution. So to a large extent, we need younger folks in the diaspora who know this stuff and who are involved in institutions in the United States to share some of their experiences with how democratic governance happen. And I think that is where sometimes we're missing the point. I think, you know, just like I've mentioned before that, I know we're running out of time, that, you know, Guyanese diaspora did not come to Guyana to escape Guyana. We did not come to outside of Guyana to escape Guyana. We came outside to help Guyana. And we are still willing, ready, and able to help Guyana. Yes, we did with the barrel, we did with money transfer, we did it with making the right contacts to get the folks in Guyana to deliver a free and fair election. I think where we need the bodies and the minds today would definitely be in Guyana's new economy. You know, Guyana's new economy, yes, we've got the oil and we've got the other sectors that are growing, but we need bodies and people in Guyana. The diaspora can do that. Guyana, you know, if there is a deeper pull for diaspora, I think diaspora will go. And I think what will evolve naturally with the diaspora being there for whether jobs or whether for investments is the governance issue. You know, I think we will bring a perspective and a thinking that will allow a governance structure in Guyana that brings democracy at the deeper level and not just at the top level. I'm going to stop there, but those are some of my final thoughts in terms of where the diaspora needs to go. We're not going away. I think we've got a role to play. We need to play that role, and it's a two-way traffic. Diaspora engagement is not a one-way traffic from Guyana to diaspora. It's a diaspora to Guyana also. But we've got to build that highway. We've got to build that bridge to ensure that a two-way traffic moves very fluidly. Thank you.
Before Chuck concludes the session with us, Salim, perhaps you could take on the responsibility to do this documentary. You're good in these kind of things. We need to document the struggle. Look, Chuck has a history, Mel has a history. All of this have so much to contribute. You talked about economic contributions to Guyana. Professor Taran Kemraj estimated that actual cash transfer to Guyana between 1980 to now is an estimated $16 billion US. That's actual direct cash transfer. That doesn't include the billions more that were taken when Guyanese actually visit Guyana and change under the table. And it doesn't include the materials and the boxes and barrels that were shipped to Guyana. Chuck, Mohan.
Yeah,
please.
I know we shifted from what the original intent of this program.
Yes, so bring us back. You're the professor, bring us back.
Talking about the struggle, the early struggle for free and fair elections. And we took it to another level, but this is what I want to say, is that quite recently, many of you remember the elections in Queens for the city council seat, where a young lady, Ms. Singh,
in my district,
Singh ran. And that was a perfect example to see how Guyanese have regressed politically, that a group of right-wing Trump supporters, Guyanese, were involved in having to defeat this young woman, a progressive woman that we needed.
A school teacher.
Yes, a teacher. And a working class woman from a working class family. And the problem here was, which is sad, is that one of the leaders, Romeo Hitlal, who claims to be representing the community, not. And we have some people who are tagging along. And that is very bad for the future of the Guyanese diaspora.
Chuck, a quick rejoinder. Who won the seat?
One second.
Who won the seat?
Joan Ariola. Go ahead.
Ariola, the Republican choice. What is sad is that we understand in New York City politics, for example, Guyanese will not get a seat at the table. We get crumbs because the people who are winning these little elections, the district leader, etc., are opportunistic. And that is the problem with the Guyanese diaspora. They say one thing and they do different things, and the entrenched politicians have them in the palm of their hands and they do their bidding for them. Okay? And what I am concerned about also is that those same people say they support the PPP. Unless the PPP, and I'm just raising a question, unless the PPP has been moving away from Dr. Jagan's vision and they are now becoming right-wingers. Okay? I don't know. I'm just asking that question. But I think that we, as the older people here, should try to continue to push progressive politics. Let's take care of the working people in our communities also. It's not all about making money, guys. You'll make your money. We know that. But let's not that be the only thing. Let's think about human beings first. And this is what our community is totally moving away from. And while I say this about our Guyanese community, there are also other communities the same. Okay, we have come now, a lot of people, this country is divided. Don't let them think that it's only in Guyana you vote according to race. Let's not say that. You're voting according to race here in America too. Always have been and continue to. All right? But I think that we should continue this discussion.
Absolutely.
And I totally support what Vishnu said, that we need to document this in a more detailed fashion. Each one of us writing and giving our thoughts. And I want to thank Vishnu for having this program. We needed to have this a long time ago. Okay, and I want to thank you, Vishnu. And let me just leave with this. I get into lots of problems and verbal fights with people about Vishnu. He doesn't know. When they challenge him in terms of his polling, and people who don't know Vishnu don't know that this man has been doing that for, oh my God, so many years. So many years. But when people want to attack someone, they choose anything to attack. All right. So
yeah.
Thank you.
If I could, Vishnu, 1 minute, just 30 seconds maybe.
Okay.
I just want to acknowledge Vishnu also for writing from so many years ago until today, and I know traveling to Guyana for you has been troublesome during the PNC days, and even after that to some extent, so you've played an important role. In that same vein, a lot of Guyanese who were ready to print articles, who we requested to print articles written by you and Ravi and others, they were not ready to print it. So even printing things were so difficult to get. So I mean, writing was so important then. It continues to be, and it has to be. Vishnu, you played your role.
Oh, thank you. Mel?
Let me say quickly, the first time I ever wrote anything, an article for a newspaper, was when Vishnu called me up after Chetty Jagan. No, I think yes, Chetty Jagan had died, and he asked me to write something, and I wrote a sort of obituary to Chetty Jagan, which I described how I saw him, how I remembered him. I could still remember the color of shirt he wore when I saw him the first time ever, around 1957, when I was about 8 years old. And the first time article I ever wrote in his newspaper, he was publishing a monthly paper called Guyana Abroad. and that would have been around 1991. I wrote an article on the Iraq-Kuwait War, the first Gulf War. So without Vishnu, maybe I would have never started writing anything. He probably inspired me to write.
Anything final words, Mel?
I think he dropped off.
Okay, so listen, I want to thank you all very, very much for taking your time out. Yes, there will be a follow-up session or sessions. There should be, and this should be documented in writing as well as a documentary. We should give thought to it as well. One final tribute to Arjun Karshan. I know his name was mentioned several times. I remember in the 70s, I don't think people even had electronic typewriters. I remember people typing in those old typewriters. I used to use it too, so I know it was manual and they were hard. You had to hit the button very hard to get the letter to print. And there were several people who volunteered in preparing those typewritten papers that became the newsletter, the Committee for Democracy and Majority Rule. I think that's what Chuck was referring to as well. They had a newsletter out in the 70s.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike, before we go?
Karshan did a lot of work. He used to publish a monthly Guyana news. It was really stenciled. And he used to drop it at all the Guyanese grocery stores, the Bronx, Brooklyn
everywhere, yes.
It was a labor of love.
It was.
I was really surprised. I even Rajendra saying, well, I don't know the inside politics of the group, but I heard many stories that Rajendra came in and pushed him aside. But Rajendra, I will tell you guys today, and I think this is going to broadcast it on Facebook, whoever heard it, Rajendra did not do anything as far as I know. Karshan did all the work. And the second thing,
it wasn't only Karshan, it was Chuck. In fact, I think Chuck would have done much more than Karshan because I was intimately. I saw Chuck everywhere.
All the legwork that I know of, but Chuck contributed in different ways. But all those work going to all those grocery stores, getting that publication out.
Yes, that's true.
Was Karshan's work. Yes. Karshan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much. Let's continue this discussion some other time. And see you again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here.
Good night. Best wishes.